Hi, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from RicoScores coming with a late night, or for probably most of y'all, early morning upload. As you can see in the title, Adam Schefter said himself, Ben Johnson is not the favorite for the Washington Commanders head coaching job as of what he knows right now. He said that MacDonald, Quinn, and others are, quote, very much in play, unquote. We're going to do a deep dive into his entire article because he has an article that he posted himself on Twitter. So we're going to dive into that. And of course, we got to talk about everything centered around this situation. Because first of all, we got to talk about the list of head coaches that the Commanders have officially interviewed to see who he may be referring to, who may actually still be in the running. Also, we're going to talk about why I'm still very confident in the fact that the Washington Commanders will hire Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson as their next head coach. Also, why is this Adam Schefter report like completely contradictory to basically all other reporting we've heard on this Ben Johnson to Commander situation so far? We're going to dive into all of those different aspects, all of those different viewpoints. But before we do, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get a notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Stay tuned because like I said, I'm going to update y'all on every little thing that's going on. So make sure y'all stay up to date with everything Commanders, whether it's a rumor or if it's a report, if it's a film session, mock draft, anything, man. I'm keeping y'all entertained and informed at the same time with everything burgundy and gold. And again, I'm working on watching a lot of the college tape for a lot of potential draft prospects that the Commanders may be interested in. So make sure you stay tuned for that because that will be for channel members only. And without further ado, man, let's go ahead and get to this video. Let's get it. All right, so Adam Schefter, under the title of ESPN senior writer, has an article titled Sources, Commanders, Seahawks Eye Head Coach Candidates from Ravens and Lions. And then he goes on to say, of all the people tuned into Sunday's conference championship games, few will be more interested than the Washington Commanders and Seattle Seahawks, the last two NFL teams with current head coaching vacancies. And I want to emphasize that with all of these available head coaches still out there, and Mike MacDonald, Bobby Slowick, Ben Johnson, Bill Belichick, just to name a few, just to start the list, Aaron Glenn, Anthony Weaver, a whole lot of guys out there. There are only 2 spots left. Like if we're talking musical chairs, there are about 8 qualified contestants and only 2 chairs left, and we're one of those 2 chairs. And again, I've already done a full breakdown on why I feel like we are the best chair. We're the shiniest, most comfy chair out of the 2 chair options. I mean, yeah, the Seattle Seahawks is a really good chair, but the Washington Commanders is arguably the best chair that was available even when everybody still, even when there were more chairs available and all NFL teams still didn't have, not one guy hired a new head coach yet, and everybody still had a vacancy. I would argue the Washington Commanders was the best chair then, and it's amazing that that chair is still available at this point, in my opinion. But you can tell that the Commanders, first of all, the fact that, I mean, we've interviewed so many people, which I'm going to bring up when we talk about why this report is so contradictory to other reports that we've heard. I want to go ahead and get this out the way now. We've had plenty of opportunities to hire a lot of the people we've already talked to. Quinn has already, or is on the way to, a 3rd interview. We could have been hired him. Bobby Slowick has already had 2 interviews, one being in person as well. We've already talked to literally everybody in person that we've wanted to, other than Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson of the Detroit Lions, and potentially Mike MacDonald from the Ravens. Shouts out my boy Todd Monken too over there. He's not being considered for our job, but you never know, man. Somebody may need to give my Georgia dog a shot. But either way, back to my main point. Other teams have already hired their head coaches. There's a reason there's only 2 spots left. It's not like there's anything illegal or anything misguided from teams hiring their head coaches as early as they've already done it. You can argue that it's not even what they've done as early. You can more so say that the Commanders and Seahawks are more so late to the situation. All of these other teams have already hired their head coaches, and it makes sense for them to. It's probably the smart thing, especially if you're the Panthers, where it's kind of like, I mean, this is the best we can do at this time because nobody really wants to come to this ugly situation where we're forcing David Tepper and Bryce Young onto you and telling you to figure it out, basically. I mean, poor Dave Canales of the Buccaneers going to the Panthers. I mean, great job getting the head coaching opportunity, but your work is cut out for you. You were definitely dealt a bad hand. But out of the way, a lot of other teams have already hired their head coaches, and we're the only ones waiting. So you can tell that the Commanders and the Seattle Seahawks are more than likely eyeing one of those head coaches that are still, well, head coaching candidates that are still in the playoffs as of right now, from the 49ers roster, the Lions roster, the Ravens roster, the Chiefs roster, but more than likely the two guys from the Lions roster and then one guy from the Ravens roster. Otherwise, we would have went ahead and hired if our top candidate was already available and no longer in the playoffs, say if our top candidate was Bobby Slowick, we probably would have hired him by now. Let's just go ahead and get that out the way now. There's clear intent for waiting. Yeah, there's a such thing as doing your due diligence, but there's a reason that all of the other teams have already hired their guys. They had a guy in mind, they had their target, they went and got him. I'm pretty sure we're doing the same thing, but in the Commanders and Seahawks case, their targets are guys that we can't interview in person just yet because we legally are not allowed to, just simply because they're still in the running for a Super Bowl right now. So let's go ahead and get that out the way now. Going back to the Adam Schefter article, both the Commanders and Seahawks are eyeing coaches on Sunday's teams and are waiting to interview them for their head coaching jobs. And just to go back to my point real quick, because if everybody was really hoping that they had a chance or thought they had a chance with Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, or Mike MacDonald, they would have waited to hire who even they ended up hiring now. They would have waited till after they at least got a chance to interview Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, or Mike MacDonald in person. But those guys are like, nah, we're good. We got our guys. Let's go ahead and pull the trigger. I mean, I think there's multiple sides to that. First of all, I also feel like they just actually really like the guy that they ended up hiring. And I also just feel like there's an extent to, like, especially on the Panther side and maybe the Falcons as well, that it's just like, yeah, we have no chance. From what we're hearing, from the little bit that we've already like interviewed them, because everybody's had a chance to interview most of these guys anyway, either virtually and in person. And I feel like a lot of them just got a certain feel and vibe from the interview, like, yeah, Ben Johnson probably doesn't even want to go here, so let's go ahead and scratch him off the list. Thank you for interviewing with us, taking time out of your day, but we're gonna go with somebody else because you don't even seem like you really want to even coach here for real. I think there's a mix of both there. That may not necessarily pertain to like every single team in the NFL that's already hired a head coach, but I'm pretty sure that played a part. Now, continuing with the article again, the Commanders are waiting to hold second interviews with Baltimore Ravens defensive coordinator Mike MacDonald and assistant head coach, defensive lines coach Anthony Weaver, as well as Detroit Lions defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn and offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, league sources told ESPN. So it's clear. He's literally said, Adam Schefter himself, based on all of the sources that he has, that the Commanders are literally waiting until they have a chance to interview those four names I just gave you. Again, in Mike MacDonald, Anthony Weaver, Aaron Glenn, and Ben Johnson. So more than likely, for the reasons I've already stated, our head coach is quite likely to be one of those guys. Now, Dan Quinn coming in for potentially a third interview, with it being the second in-person one. Again, I'm not sure if it's already happened yet because we haven't gotten clear reporting. They just said sometime next week or soon, within a few days, something like that. So we don't know if it has already happened, if it will officially happen or anything like that. But still, the fact that they're bringing Dan Quinn back and he's potentially coming in for a third interview and we still haven't hired him yet, I'm telling you that there's clear interest, and Adam Schefter even said it himself, that we're waiting to decide on who we hire as a head coach until after we at the very least interview those guys in person. So I'm assuming that those virtual interviews went very well. And again, I would bet money that our next head coach is going to be one of those four guys that they're waiting on. Going back to the article, there are some who have viewed Johnson as the presumptive favorite for the Washington job, but multiple sources insist that that is not true. While Johnson could land the Commanders head coaching job, sources insist that there are other strong candidates, most notably MacDonald, Weaver, Glenn, and Cowboys defensive coordinator Dan Quinn, who still are, quote, very much in play, unquote. Quinn is also scheduled to interview a second time with the Commanders, according to sources. Again, like I already said, he's already interviewed virtually, then he interviewed in person, I believe, already, and then now he's potentially coming in for a second in-person interview, which is a third interview overall. Also, the Seahawks did not get the chance to interview MacDonald and cannot do so until the Ravens season ends, raising questions over whether Seattle will be willing to wait to interview him for a first time if Baltimore advances to the Super Bowl. That's something they got to consider there. So basically, going from the Seahawks point of view to the Commanders point of view, if Ben Johnson is really our top candidate, we have to go out there and hope that in this next playoff game against the 49ers, which is, well, today technically, because right now it's 6 a.m. while I'm recording this, and by the time a lot of y'all are watching this is like well into the day leading up to that matchup. But we basically, as Commanders fans, have to root for the best case scenario being the Lions score 60 but lose, or at the very least, like, Ben Johnson's offense looks amazing, they look unstoppable, but at the same time they lose. That way Ben Johnson looks ridiculous, he looks great, he goes out on a high note, great playoff run and all of that. You losing is not your fault. You did everything you could do. Your offense was spectacular, and bring that exact offense over to the Commanders and all of that type of stuff. But at the same time, the quicker he loses, the quicker we can interview him in person, and the quicker we can go ahead and hire him as head coach, potentially, if that's the way that we want to go. Because if the Lions do lose to the 49ers, which is quite likely, but again, I hope that Ben Johnson goes out swinging and goes out on a very high note. I don't want him to just straight up just lose and get embarrassed. I still want him to look good, potentially becoming our head coach on the way out. But I believe that we can interview him as soon as Monday, like literally football game Sunday, potentially lose, and then we're able to interview him on Monday. And going back to the article, since the Seahawks interviewed Johnson already, they are permitted to speak with him this week regardless of Detroit's result, because of the NFL rule that states that beginning Monday, January 29th through Sunday, February 4th, the bye week between the conference championship games and the Super Bowl, second interviews in person or virtual are permitted for head coaching candidates employed by clubs that will participate in the Super Bowl. Prior notification must be provided to the employer club. So far, the Commanders have interviewed Weaver, MacDonald, Johnson, Glenn, Quinn, and the Texans offensive coordinator Bobby Sloyer. Okay, before we move on, I do want to point out the fact that I did a video reporting on the fact that sources said that the Commanders have already sent a contingent to the Lions. The Falcons and the Commanders did this, but now the Falcons have already backed out of it. They went ahead and hired Raheem Morris, and so far from reporting that we saw, maybe another team did it, maybe the Seattle Seahawks did it, and the report just never came out. No Adam Schefter, no Ian Rappaport, no Pelissero, none of those guys tweeted it out there, put it out there in any way through video or whatever. But the Commanders went out of their way to send a contingent to the Lions that basically says, again, like we just broke down, whether the Lions win or lose, so scratch everything I just said for the past 7 minutes, whether the Lions win or lose, we can still interview Ben Johnson immediately. Now, of course, though, not to completely scratch everything that I said, if Ben Johnson does actually for real lose, then not only can we go ahead and interview him, but we can go ahead and hire him. We can go ahead and come out and announce we're signing Ben Johnson to this amount of years for this much money, all of that type of stuff. If Ben Johnson wins, yeah, we can interview him again, but we can't technically hire him. He's still under contract for the Detroit Lions, so it still matters. Like, again, ideally as a Commanders fan, we hope that he goes crazy, they score 50 points and a loss still, but at the end of the day, we get to interview him in person no matter what as of Monday, and we flew all the way out to Detroit to interview this guy, so it's very serious. Also, let me go ahead and point out the fact that Adam Schefter said during this hiring cycle, 8 NFL teams have changed head coaches and 6 already have filled their jobs. The Patriots hired Gerard Mayo, the Raiders hired Antonio Pierce, who was their interim, the Chargers hired Jim Harbaugh from Michigan, the Titans hired Brian Callahan, the Panthers hired Dave Canales. I mean, whoo, poor him, man. I mean, you can never really turn down a head coaching opportunity, especially as a one-year offensive coordinator. Like, that's a ridiculous opportunity that no matter how bad the situation is, you got to jump on it. But boy, you have my sympathy. And then the Falcons hired Raheem Morris, which is a pretty good hire for them. I mean, I feel like honestly that's a better hire than what Bill Belichick would have ended up being, with him being a control freak over there. And as a Falcons hater, I would have preferred if they hired Bill Belichick, because I feel like he could have set them back a little bit more than Raheem Morris. And it's just so stupid because they have Raheem Morris as an interim head coach, and then they gave Arthur Smith the actual job after Raheem Morris was the interim and actually looked pretty good as a head coach for them. And then now look what happened. Life comes full circle. You did all of that, and now you come back to me again. Raheem Morris should basically just go ahead and drop all of the Thanos memes, because they literally went through all of that for the past couple of years for nothing, just to end up hiring Raheem Morris as the head coach like they should have been done. But again, as a Falcons hater, I'm glad they didn't, and I'm also a little sad that they hired him, because that's still a solid hire. Raheem Morris is a really good potential head coach. I prefer Ben Johnson, I prefer Bobby Slowick, I prefer Mike McDonald, but Raheem Morris is nice as well. I got to give the Falcons their credit there. So now moving on. Again, like I've already said in other videos, you aren't flying to Detroit to just play around, because we didn't fly to Dallas to interview Dan Quinn. We didn't fly to LA to interview Raheem Morris, and it doesn't look like we're even planning to fly to Baltimore just in case to interview Mike McDonald or Anthony Weaver, even though they look like one of the last remaining top candidates available. We are flying only to Detroit to make sure we already sent that contingent. We're interviewing him as soon as possible. I would be surprised if we wait till later than Monday, the first day that we're allowed to actually interview him. Game on Sunday, win or loss, interviewing him Monday, I don't care. Let's go ahead and wrap this up. You'll be our next head coach. Let's go ahead and get this thing going. We can't necessarily officially sign anything or announce anything until you're officially out of the playoffs. So if they happen to beat the 49ers, that delays a lot of things for like another couple of weeks. Honestly, it does. But if they lose, we can go ahead and get this show on the road. We can go ahead and get our head coach, and then we can figure out who's going to be our defensive coordinator, because I already did a video breaking down who Ben Johnson. It's already been reported from several sources that Ben Johnson would love to bring his offensive lines coach to be the offensive coordinator. They already have chemistry. It's not a guy that clashes with him. It's not a guy that wants play calling responsibilities and duties and something like that. It's a guy that he trusts, can be his right hand man to run that same system that they have going for the Lions. And the Lions offensive line is excellent, so anybody that can come and help our offensive line improve in any way possible, at least to the something better than what we've had since our boy Bill Callahan left years ago to go to, I think, the Cleveland Browns. I think. Either way, though, our offensive line really hasn't been anything since Bill Callahan left. And if we can bring somebody in here that's an expert offensive lines coach / offensive coordinator, whatever he wants to do, bring him with you, Ben Johnson, please. I already did a whole breakdown on that, who it is and why it's a great idea and all of that type of stuff. But again, we are not flying to Detroit for no reason. I know what Adam Schefter's saying and all of that, but we're not just going there for literally no reason at all. So I'm pretty sure I would still bet money that we're going to end up hiring Ben Johnson as a head coach. I would be very shocked if we didn't. Everything so far has been perfect. I mean, whether Ben Johnson is your favorite candidate or not, where there's smoke has just been fire this whole off season so far for us, as far as like getting Adam Peters. A lot of people were down when I said all the way back in November that we would be the top landing spot for a GM and a head coach. People doubted it, and then at a certain point we ended up with Adam Peters, Ian Cunningham, and Alec Hallaby, arguably the top 3 GM candidates available, all fighting for that one Commanders GM spot. And then we pick the best, in my opinion, out of that group. And then now we have potentially Ben Johnson, Mike McDonald, and Bobby Slowick, my 3 favorite candidates, fighting for this one head coaching spot on the Commanders. I believe I wouldn't be surprised if we get our guy there. Whether it's Ben Johnson, Bobby Slowick, or Mike McDonald, I feel like Ben Johnson's the most likely, and we'll see what happens. But either way, I think no matter what, as a fan, as a Commanders fan, Burgundy and Gold fan, you should be excited about who we end up hiring, because I'm pretty sure it's going to be somebody this great no matter what. Unless we end up picking Dan Quinn for no reason. Now I'm upset. And I know, again, nothing has been definitive, and there hasn't been a lot of reports coming out straight from like the Commanders camp themselves. Like, we haven't heard Adam Peters say it with his own mouth or Josh Harris say it with his own mouth. But again, when there's smoke, there's usually fire, man. And at this point, Ben Johnson only has 3 choices total at all. Like, become the Seahawks head coach, 1. Stay in Detroit as an offensive coordinator, running away from more power, control, and money again, like you did last year. That's option 2. Or option 3, become the head coach of the biggest winners of the offseason so far in the Washington Commanders' most cap space. ridiculous draft capital, top 2 draft capital out of the entire NFL as well. Number 2 overall pick. Come on, bro. So let me go ahead and point this out. Let's go ahead and eliminate staying in Detroit. I highly doubt. I feel like that's the least likely option. I feel like he's more likely to sign with the Seahawks and become their head coach than he is to stay in Detroit again. I feel like that's the least likely option. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. I feel like the only reason he did that last hiring cycle was because he already foresaw how awful an option the Carolina Panthers were. And then look how that whole thing went down the drain. And now they don't even have a first round pick going into this draft, even though they had the worst record in the NFL. I mean, just womp, womp, womp type of stuff over there. David Tepper looks like the new Dan Snyder. It's awful. And then I feel like both the Seahawks and Commanders are better landing spots in 2024 than the Panthers ever were in 2023 or in 2024. And so that leaves us with only 2 options left. Go become the head coach for the Seattle Seahawks or the Washington Commanders. I've already done a full 30-minute breakdown as to why we are the better landing spot for Ben Johnson based on general managers, again, draft capital, cap space, and capital to bring us as much talent as you want in March as far as free agency trades and things like that. And then even just like number 2 draft pick versus what the Seattle Seahawks have, which is what, like 18th or something like that, 13th, somewhere down there in the teens. I forgot already. But I mean, Geno Smith or potentially Caleb Williams, Drake May, or Jaden Daniels. Like, come on, bro. I know that boy Shane Waldron did a great job with Geno Smith, but to make matters even worse, the guy that unlocked Geno Smith and had Geno Smith finally looking good for the first time in his NFL career is now the offensive coordinator for the Bears. So they lost that guy. I mean, maybe Ben Johnson, if he wanted to, could go there and be like, okay, tell me everything Shane Waldron did and let me try to replicate that as much as possible, but mix in my own offense there as well. Maybe that type of situation, but I just don't see it. With the opportunity to get an elite talent at quarterback, like either of those 3 options are right there with the number 2 overall pick. And then again, the most cap space in the NFL. Come on, dog. You just can't. I've already done a full 30-minute breakdown on that, but just to simply talk about the surface obvious stuff, we have to be the best option left. So in conclusion, I still have them landing with the Commanders. It's just a matter of time, in my personal opinion. I'm not gonna lie. Now, why is this information an exact contradiction of all other reports on Ben Johnson being the Commanders' top target so far that we've been hearing from basically everywhere? I mean, Boomer Esiason literally came out and said it's a lock. His co-host said, "Are you sure?" He said, "Yes, it's a lock." He asked him, "Are you sure?" again, and then he tripled down on it. It's a lock. It's going to happen. Put his name beside it. Ben Johnson to Commanders. If it doesn't happen, you can come back and laugh at me and take away all of my reporting credentials, all that type of stuff. He put his name beside the fact that it will happen. And maybe that was just starting to build up too much steam. I mean, the way that Adam Schefter even worded the report that I just read to y'all from ESPN, it seems like it's from the point of view of the Commanders. And maybe they wanted this information out there to take back some leverage. Like, whoa. Yes, we are really interested in Ben Johnson, but we can't let him and everybody know that. Like, golly, we need some leverage here. We got to act like we have some other options out there. And it's not just beeline, laser focus, completely just blinders on Ben Johnson and that's it. Ben Johnson or bust type of situation. That's just literally handing Ben Johnson all the leverage. Because if everybody and they mama out here saying that Ben Johnson to the Commanders is a lock, not only most likely or quite likely, you have a lot of people, different sources everywhere saying it's guaranteed to happen. They would put money on it type of situation. And that the Commanders really want him. If everybody and they mama know that, then maybe Ben Johnson can negotiate for more money with that type of leverage. I don't have any proof of that at all. This is all just speculation. This is just me brainstorming over here. But I think that this is just a way for the Commanders to send a message to Ben Johnson and his camp, his agent and all of that, that the Commanders still have multiple options and they're not too desperate to hire him. Like, hey man, if you act crazy in these contract negotiations, you get out of your brain, you step up outside of your body, you asking for too much money on, then we might have to consider one of these other top candidates, because it's a lot of top candidates out there. There's only 2 teams left available. It's several of y'all. It's like 7 good candidates out there. Supply and demand technically Ben Johnson's more desperate than we are when you look at it that way. But again, we lose a lot of that leverage when it's just clear cut that the Commanders are doing everything that they can to hire him. But then again, that may be a compliment to Ben Johnson. Like, man, these guys really want me. And for them to, I mean, doing all of the right things so far this offseason. First of all, Dan Snyder selling the team to Josh Harris. How great of a job Josh Harris has done so far. Bringing in Bob Myers, Eugene Shin, Rick Spielman, Tim McGrath, all of these guys that, even if it's just a really small marginal amount, like a very minute amount, if they do anything to help contribute to this team becoming better on and off the field, Josh Harris is willing to pay you to do that thing. And then to land the top GM candidate available, arguably one of the best talent evaluators in the NFL, at the very least, rounds 3 through 7, arguably the best talent evaluator, scout, all of that type of stuff in the NFL. Out of all of these geniuses that are around the NFL and their front offices and coaching staff, to be able to land that guy and to have that guy fighting against Ian Cunningham and Alec Hallaby, other top GMs, all fighting for that one job. If that team is this interested in you, they must have an elite plan to build a Super Bowl contender very soon. At the very least, to start to form some type of rebuild that's going to lead to a dynasty. You know, one of those teams that's always in it. How the Ravens are always in it. With the Patriots, you know, a few years ago, they were known as a team that was always in it. A lot of these teams that have their elite quarterbacks always in it. The Bills have always been in it for a while. The Chiefs have always been in it for a while. Even if they don't win the Super Bowl, the Commanders look like they're headed to a path where they're always in the conversation. One of those teams you never want to see when it comes to December, January, and potentially February. So honestly, you can look at it two ways. I feel like if I'm Ben Johnson, I'm like, man, this team is doing everything right, prioritizes me that much. Like, we must have, maybe I'm doing something right type of thing. He should take it as a compliment, for real. Also, shouts out Nikki Javala for pointing this out. The Lions coaching staff coached the American team in the 2022 Senior Bowl. Ben Johnson was named the Lions offensive coordinator days later. And on that American team roster, 5 future Commanders, including Sam Howell and Brian Robinson Jr., were there. So he already has like a little inside look on some players he may potentially be coaching for the Commanders. So stay tuned for that, man. Stay tuned. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know if you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Man, I really appreciate y'all. Make sure y'all stay tuned for all of the content. Again, your one-stop shop for everything burgundy and gold, whether it's a rumor or a report, if it's factual, opinionated, mock drafts, free agency mocks. I'm about to start doing off-season mocks, basically in the scenario as, like, if we sign an elite edge rusher, an elite linebacker, we don't necessarily have to worry about that in the draft. So then come the draft, we focus on offensive line, DB, tight end, quarterback, and things like that. I'm gonna start doing mock drafts that include the draft, but also include free agency as well, that explains why I made those draft picks and things like that. So make sure you stay tuned for all. And of course, whenever we get a head coach, which will more than likely be an offensive-minded Ben Johnson, be on the lookout for on a video for my top defensive coordinator candidates, because a lot of my guys are already gone. My favorite one, Ryan Nielsen, that was the ex-Falcons defensive coordinator, is now the defensive coordinator for the Jaguars. So now I got to do a lot more research to find my top candidates, and after we potentially hire an offensive-minded head coach and a Ben Johnson, I'm going to come out with a video like that as well. So stay tuned for all the content. Again, minimum 1 video a day, but I'm trying to get back to 2-3 videos a day. I just been super busy. I'm sorry. Catch y'all later. It's late at night, man. I'm about to head to bed. As soon as I'm done with this, I'm out.